Let's get some opinions now on the Buffalo Bills from Aaron Quinn, co-host of Cover One Buffalo podcast, joining us here on Sportsnet Tonight. Aaron, always great to have you on the show. Happy New Year to you. I assume it's a pretty happy New Year for the Buffalo Bills, but you're in that situation now, Aaron, where, we've talked about it. Finally, it's a time where the game absolutely does mean nothing. You're locked in the number 2 seed, and easy enough to think that, well, obviously you're not going to play, give some people some rest and have a chance to recuperate. But, Aaron, I always get nervous this time of year when teams have this kind of situation because, okay, you don't play the last regular season game, then there's a week off, and then you play. That's 2 weeks between games. Sometimes, that makes me as nervous as maybe a starter getting hurt in a meaningless game.
Yeah, well, first of all, good, Happy New Year to you as well, Raj. And yeah, it's a weird spot for Bills fans to be in, especially going to New England to play. In all those years of the drought and the Patriots' dominance, my co-host Greg Thompson looked it up the other day. We never had this scenario in reverse. As dominant as the Patriots were, they never had the division locked up so early. They never had the 2 seed or weren't fighting for home field or something where they also had nothing to play for, and the Bills were either trying to lose for a draft pick or didn't have anything to play for. So this is kind of rare territory at the end of the season, and I don't think the NFL likes it very much with not just the Bills game. There's a lot of games that are sort of meaningless in terms of the competitive advantage for playoffs or people playing for seeding and stuff. So it's a weird spot to be. I do wish the NFL had a little bit of something like what baseball has or what other sports have, where you're still limited to the 2 practice squad call-ups that they can have. It'd be nice if they could bring some more of those guys, one, to get a look at them. I think fans would like to see some of these guys that you fell in love with in the preseason. But 2, to your point, to maybe shield from some of the injury woes. The Bills do have a lot of players that have had lingering injuries, showing up on the injury report as limited or, playing through injury. Would be nice to get some of those guys some rest. But to your point, you don't want to go into the playoffs rusty either. But I don't think the Bills are going to have to worry about that. We're past the days of the 2 seed getting the bye, right? Only Kansas City is going to be the one with a real substantial amount of rest, and it sounds like they're resting all their starters, so they're going to get a real couple weeks without playing here. The Bills are going to jump right into whoever it is, maybe the Broncos or the Bengals or Miami, whoever ends up kind of coming out this weekend. And so I think it will be good to allow some of these guys to rest, but the way the numbers play out, you're going to still have to play a lot of starters here this Sunday.
Well, and what's interesting too, Aaron, is all the talk of the MVP voting and everything else and all of that, it does show at the end of the day, people mention stats and MVP and who's the MVP and everything else. And you see, Barkley, Allen, some of the contenders. Joe Burrow is different because Cincinnati still has an outside shot. Of course, he's going to play and he's going to rack up some yards at the end of the season. But it's not about the temptation would be you're playing the crummy New England Patriots. If you think you're really going for the MVP, you get out there and just rack up your stats to increase your MVP votes. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. And good on them for not doing it. Barkley has a chance to set the all-time rushing record. Who cares? If I'd done it earlier, it would have been nice to have it and everything else. But at the end of the day, we have a chance to win a Super Bowl. That's the most important thing, and we're going to do the best thing to win the Super Bowl. So with all the talk of individual stats, it's still great to see that everybody is focused on the only thing that really matters, the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and luckily, though, the thing that matters a lot to Josh Allen this week is the streak of starting games, which is kind of crazy with the way that he plays. You've been hearing for years, like, he can't maintain that type of physical play that he plays, but yet he's got the biggest or longest starting active streak, and he'd like to continue that. So that's only going to require him to get in there and hand the ball off a handful of times. What I will say is there's a fine line with some of this stuff, Raj, where some of these guys have incentives. There's a million and something reasons for Von Miller to try to play and get a sack this weekend because he has an incentive in his contract for 6 sacks on the year. Now, granted, his biggest contract incentive is playing 30% of snaps in the Super Bowl, so he's got a bigger goal in mind as well. But he's just one example of guys that within their contracts there are some statistical incentives that whether or not fans think it matters, it does matter to those guys. And Sean McDermott mentioned that a little bit in his press conference today, of that balance of allowing players, because you don't want to be the team that doesn't allow players to go out and hit their contract incentives, but also being mindful of the bigger team goals. And that we've seen at the end of the year for Bills teams in the past, you lose a key player and it does make all the difference here in single elimination games going forward. So there's a balancing act to it. And I'm really interested to see how the Bills kind of balance that here throughout the weekend.
Yeah, that will be interesting. There's no question about that. And some of them are kind of public. Some of them aren't, Aaron. And you bring up a great point when you talk about incentives, because that's a little different if you've got financial incentives. If Barkley had a incentive in his contract for, say, 2,000 yards and he was sitting at 1997, it might be a little bit different saying.
Correct, yeah.
So I get that. The best one that comes to mind, it's kind of off topic, but I got to bring it because I've been watching it. Mike Evans has one of the best incentive clauses in his contract. 70 catches, 1,000 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Okay, $3 million if he hits all three. Now Tampa still has a game they must win. So of course he's going to play, and of course they're going to look for him because he's an important part. He now needs 5 catches for 85 yards in the last game of the season to get a bonus of $3 million. Like some initiatives are $500,000, some $750,000. $3 million. Well, yeah, that changed how much I want to play on Sunday. And I would suggest if Tampa Bay had clinched, we'd probably still see Evans on the field. But it's a fair point. But it is about the team, and it's about cashing through. Do you feel better about the Bills' chances this season than you did last year?
In terms of playoff success?
Yes.
Man, I don't know, Raj. There's the fan in me that is optimistic, and I think if they're playing their best football, they're one of the top 4 teams in the NFL, and I do think they can beat anyone. This is a tough stretch that they're going to have to go through. Assume it's Denver, right? Denver's an 80-something% chance to be that 7 seed. Stuff could go wrong. They could lose to a bad Chiefs team, or that's not starting anybody, but I'm going to assume it's them. That's not a cakewalk. That's a really difficult defense. That's an offensive line that can dominate the line of scrimmage. We saw them go toe-to-toe with Cincinnati, who everybody's kind of scared of having to play Cincinnati. They went into overtime with them, and if it wasn't for Sean Payton making some weird, bad coaching decisions at the end, they might have won that game. So that's a tough one. Baltimore looks like a powerhouse right now. I know fans want to argue about Lamar Jackson, is he deserving for the MVP? And Bills fans will kind of try to tear him down to prop up Josh Allen, but that's insincere. Lamar Jackson's playing fantastic. Derrick Henry looks unstoppable. That defense is starting to really come along too. And then obviously the Chiefs haven't had their best looking year, but they're the 1 seed. Still not playing great football. They're still finding ways to win. And what we do know is Patrick Mahomes is real tough to beat in the playoffs. So that's a stretch that you got to get through just to get to the Super Bowl. And then you got some real bad team or real good teams on that NFC side too. The Philadelphia Eagles terrify me in terms of a matchup for the Bills if they were to meet in the Super Bowl. So it's not going to be an easy road. I think going into the postseason here, I don't think the Bills are the favorite. I think they're like third or fourth favorite to win the Super Bowl. And those odds are only at like 20-30% to get it done because of the one and done element of NFL playoffs. That's what makes it so tough to win one.
Well, and without question, your comments about Baltimore are bang on, and they're a team that's already handed it to the Bills this year, and a team that appears to be peaking at the right time. In fact, when you look at them, it's hard to believe they lost 5 games when you see how good they are. They really are that good. So everybody's going to be tough for sure. What is the latest injury status you're hearing? How healthy are the Bills heading in to the New England game? And what percentage of that lineup do you think ultimately is either not going to play or is going to be in there, as we expect Allen to be, for a snap or two to keep a streak going and then to the sidelines?
Yeah, well, Sean McDermott already declared Terrell Bernard out, although he did practice in a limited role this week, and he said he feels good about him going into the postseason. So I think that's just being conservative with a key player who they lost last playoffs, right? They lost him in the Steelers game, and that came up pretty substantially in the Kansas City game. So I think they're trying to be careful with him. Curtis Samuel, who has been out for a while, just really his whole season, a lot of fans are frustrated because he did get paid fairly well in free agency, and people want to call him a bust, but he dealt with turf toe in the summer, and that's an injury that kind of sounds silly, and I wish they would rename it because it's not a silly injury. It's a very serious injury to your foot and the muscle in your toes and feet. And so he dealt with that, and then now he has a rib, and so he's been limited all week, and he's listed as questionable for the game. I do think they would like to get him some reps before the postseason. I think they have a plan for him, but that one's a questionable. All the other limiteds, Sean McDermott talked about them playing this week and trying to get out there. DeMar Hamlin is a big one. He's had a rib here for about 3 weeks. He missed 3 games, about a month of football. And there's been a lot of questions within the fan base. Colt Bishop, the second-round pick, has actually played pretty well in that spot, and he's got a lot of athleticism and things people like. DeMar Hamlin played really well as well when he was in that spot, and so I think there's a conversation about who's going to start in the playoffs. And I think Sean McDermott said to one of the reporters that Hamlin might even play the full game just to shake off some rust and see where he's at heading into the postseason so they can make that kind of call. Matt Milano was full. I know that he's been up on the injury report. Taylor Rapp, the other safety, has been limited for a few weeks, but he's played in recent games. So I think the Bills are relatively healthy. I know in terms of IR designations, they're one of the healthiest teams in the league. They don't have a lot of guys on the injury reserve, but no teams are healthy at this point. You got a lot of guys limping into the playoffs, dealing with some type of ailment, injury. But in terms of the other teams and in comparison to their peers, the Bills look to be in pretty good shape as they head into the postseason.
Well, that's good news for Bills fans for sure. Aaron Quinn is the co-host of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Roger Lajoie, Sportsnet Today. Bills wrap up a terrific regular season against New England. 1:00 start on Sunday. Then they await to see who they play in the first round of the playoffs as they head in as the number 2 seed in the AFC. What's the mood like among the fan base there, Aaron? You guys in your podcast know that, and you know Bills Mafia is a very passionate fan base, and I always equate it a little bit though to kind of like the fan base here with the Toronto Maple Leafs, is they've had regular season success. Now every playoff starts with angst more than it does excitement, I think, here in Toronto. Now, mind you, the Leafs have only won one playoff series. The Bills have won several playoff games, and they've given Kansas City fantastic games, so it's a little bit different. But in a way, it's not. They're still waiting to break through. What's the confidence level? Are they nervous, excited? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's always a nervous element to your point. I think you nailed that. And angst in general. I know that a lot of people are nervous that somehow Cincinnati is going to overcome their 15% chance to make the playoffs and be the matchup. And I know that from past failures against Cincinnati, Bills fans are a little worried about that. There's a bit of a worry that the McDermott defense won't hold up in the postseason. There has been some letdowns. Obviously, 13 seconds is a big one that has a lot of scar tissue on Bills fans' emotions and the emotional biases we take into the postseason. And Patrick Mahomes has kind of ripped them apart, and Cincinnati did it a couple of years ago as well. And so there's examples of the Bills defense letting up in the postseason. People aren't super worried about Josh Allen. He's playing really great football. I think we believe that he can go toe-to-toe with any team and that we can keep a game close and that you have a chance as long as you have a Josh Allen. I'm personally a little torn because even though I picked the Bills to win the division, I picked all the Bills to still have some success this year in the preseason, I did buy into the idea that this team was going to underachieve a little bit from years past because of all the players they lost and because of this kind of retooling of the roster. And I think in the season they really overachieved. Plus, the division wasn't very good, right? The Jets weren't good. They clinched the division. We talked before Christmas, and the division was already clinched. And so the record looks really good. They're the number 2 seed. But I'm trying to kind of parse, should my expectations be this is a Super Bowl team that's primed to make a Super Bowl run right now, or are they kind of just happy to be there and have a chance to make a special run here in the postseason? So that's something I'm trying to kind of figure out as they get into it, because I do think some of the teams are better. If I had to pick, on the spot, like I think I'd take the Ravens coming out of the AFC. And I know Bills fans don't want to hear that. But I do think you got Josh Allen. You've got a pretty good team around him. you can beat anyone, but the one-and-done nature of NFL playoffs always makes me nervous.
Well, the sudden death of it, element of it, Aaron, does make it then. There's no guarantees. The old expression in the NFL used to be on any given Sunday. You can't say that anymore because they play every day of the week in the NFL.
Every day of the week, yeah.
But basically, any given Sunday still holds true. Anybody can beat anybody once, and especially AFC, you've got 6, 7, 10-win teams. I mean, 10-win-plus teams. A lot of good teams to go through if you're going to win. So will be fun to see. You already touched on it. Let's delve in a little bit more. The people here who we've talked to, Aaron, basically are convinced that the Bills' defense is going to be the Achilles heel. It's just not going to be good enough to win 3 playoff games against really 3 high-quality teams. Clearly, that is the concern. But just how bad or good do you think this defensive unit is, and are they capable of really stepping up when they need to? Because at some point, they're going to have to.
Yeah, I have concerns about the defensive line. Lack of their ability to get pressure on quarterbacks will matter in the postseason. They've been trending in a pretty positive way over the last couple of weeks, even though some of the scores don't look great. That Detroit game, the Bills were up 35-14 at one point, and they were dominating that really good offense. And you can say what you want about Detroit's defense and the injuries. The offense doesn't have that, and they're one of the best offenses in football. And the Bills were really able to kind of slow them down, stop them in a lot of ways, and that was a really great sign. And they've been able to generate some pressures here. I know I bring it up on the show all the time. DVOA is a really good statistic, and it breaks down, it weighs opponent, it weighs how other teams have fared. It gives you good averages and a good way to look. And I encourage everyone to go look it up if they don't know what DVOA is. It's a really contextual stat. And they have the Bills as a top 8 or top 10 defense at 8th overall. They're good against the run. They're kind of slipping against the pass a little bit. But I think that's good enough to win. We've seen teams win with worse defenses than that in NFL history. And so they're not the best defense of all the teams heading into the postseason. But sometimes good offense is good defense, if that makes sense. Scoring points is really a good way to help out your defense. And I think a lot of the times we've associated losses to the Sean McDermott defense. It's been a little bit of an excuse of we don't want to point the finger at Josh Allen. We don't want to point the finger at the offense. 13 seconds was definitely on Sean McDermott and the defense. That Cincinnati game, while Cincinnati was able to score 27 points, the offense looked terrible. They weren't able to block for Josh Allen. Josh was out of rhythm. It was just a bad offensive game, which really hurt the defensive side of the ball. I think Sean McDermott talks about it all the time. When this team's at its best, they're playing complementary football where the defense generates some takeaways and the offense responds with scores. If they're able to do those type of things, I do think the defense will be good enough. But you're playing all the best offenses in the NFL. Every metric, when you go up against the best offenses in the NFL, I don't care what your defense is, it's going to look a little worse.
Very true. So before I let you go, Aaron, I'm going to ask you this question because I had several NFL analysts. I asked them the question regarding the Bills because it's an interesting one, especially, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. And some cynics are just saying, we're talking about how great the regular season was and everything else. And end of the day, Kansas City's going to win again because of Reed and Mahomes. Well, maybe they will, maybe they won't. I still say any given Sunday. And it's, but if I wouldn't take the Chiefs against the field. Let's put it that way. But that said, the question is, especially from Buffalo's perspective, and you look at all the teams that are either in the postseason or could be in the postseason, and I know, they're not going to play Kansas City early, but if you could pick only one team that they had to play or who might be the most dangerous opponent, if you rank them, I kind of agree, and I think you're going to have the same answer. I think Baltimore is the most dangerous team that Baltimore will face. I also agree with you with Cincinnati. And I might rank Kansas City third. And that's not disrespect to Kansas City. It's just I think the Bills are due to break through against the Chiefs. They've been so close. The Bengals, just for whatever reason, drive them crazy. And I think Baltimore is underrated, even though they're 11-5. So I might pick the Chiefs as low as third as the most scariest team in the division. But what do you think in the conference? But what do you think?
Yeah, I'm struggling with it because I agree on paper. When I look at these matchups, Baltimore definitely scares me and what they're able to do. You just can't defend Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and then their receivers and tight ends. It's a game of rock, paper, scissors, and you can't defend all of it. You're going to have to give up something in order to stop one of the things, and that's just so tough right now in terms of defending them. So the way to beat them is you got to have Josh Allen outscore them, right? And their defense is playing really well. So I agree that they'd probably be up at the top. But one thing I'm having a tough time is winners just win. You know, like all those NFL analysts are saying, when it's time, they find a way to do it, and that is Patrick Mahomes and that is Andy Reid right now, where the Patriots were like this for years. You always thought they were down and out, and then they turned it on when they needed to, and they found ways to win. And Lamar Jackson right now, he might be able to change the narrative about that this year, but so far in the postseason, he hasn't found ways to win. And so I know that there's no transitive properties of previous years and historical results, but it's hard as a fan and somebody that covers the sport to not kind of consider that until we see it and you prove it to me. I kind of have to go with the team that has proven in the big spots it's not too big for them and that they can pull it off and win. And the Bills are also that team, right? They've been on the cusp. They've been close, but they haven't been able to get over the hump either. And so I do think Kansas City probably takes the edge a little bit of those teams, having proven it 4 out of the last 5 years or whatever it is.
Interesting indeed. There's no question. And not only do the Chiefs win when they have to win, i.e. the playoffs, they've done that all regular season. Everything from winning
except
on
against Buffalo.
Yeah, except against the Bills. And there's the hope, Aaron. That's exactly my point. That's the team Buffalo beat this year, not Baltimore. So we shall see. But it will be fun, as always. Bills wrap up regular season against New England, playoffs to come. We'll see how it all shakes down. Aaron Quinn, co-host of Cover One Buffalo podcast, joining us here on Sportsnet Tonight. Always fun to visit with you, Aaron. Thank you. Enjoy the game this weekend.
All right, thanks. We'll talk soon, Raj. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Aaron. You too. Aaron Quinn does great work at Cover One Buffalo.